Admiral Ellen Wright stood motionless on the command deck of the UES Vanguard, her weathered face illuminated by the glow of tactical displays. At 63, she had served humanity for 4 decades, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The Krex Armada, 2,000 warships strong, had appeared at the edge of the Arcturus system, threatening not just the 5 billion inhabitants of New Terra, but humanity's entire defensive line. "Admiral, evacuation protocols are underway, but we need at least 18 hours, said Commander Paul Garcia, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. Wright nodded, studying the holographic display where red markers representing the Krex fleet vastly outnumbered the blue dots of her own forces. Just 47 ships. How long until they reach weapons range? She asked. 3 hours, Mom. Wright's fingers traced the edge of the small memory crystal hanging from her neck, a gift from her late husband, containing their shared memories. She had made a promise to herself long ago. She would remember every ship, every soul. Begin Operation Mnemosyne, she ordered quietly. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. In her quarters just an hour earlier, Wright had reviewed the intelligence reports one final time. The Krex, an insectoid species from the outer rim, had destroyed 3 human colony worlds in the past month. Their tactics were brutal but effective. Overwhelming force applied with cold precision. We cannot match them ship for ship, Fleet Admiral William Foster had told her during their last communication. The 7th Fleet is en route, but they won't arrive for at least 20 hours. You're on your own, Ellen. Wright had simply nodded. I understand, sir. Now, standing on the bridge, Wright felt the weight of 5 billion lives on her shoulders. New Terra was humanity's most populous colony, a jewel of civilization with sprawling cities and vast oceans. If the Krex breached their defenses, the loss of life would be catastrophic. Admiral, engineering reports the quantum targeting system is online and ready, said Lieutenant Carol Mason from her station. Neural interface is standing by. Wright turned to Dr. Kira Singh, who had just entered the bridge carrying a medical kit. How long will I have once we activate the interface? Dr. Singh's expression was grim. At the scale you're proposing, maybe 2 hours before neural degradation becomes irreversible, 3 at most before. She didn't finish the sentence. Wright nodded. That should be enough time. She turned to face the main view screen, where the distant stars of the Arcturus system twinkled innocently. Somewhere out there, 2,000 Krex warships were accelerating toward them, their gunners eager, their captains confident in their overwhelming numbers. Captain Rivera, move the fleet into defensive formation Theta. All ships are to focus on protecting the Vanguard at all costs once the operation begins. Yes, Admiral, Rivera replied, already relaying the orders. Wright took a deep breath, centering herself. The experimental neural enhancements she had received would allow her to target hundreds, perhaps thousands, of enemy ships with perfect precision. But the human brain wasn't designed to process that much information. Everyone in this room knew she was unlikely to survive. Commander Garcia, begin pre-battle address to all ships. As Garcia prepared the communication channel, Wright straightened her uniform and ran a hand through her silver hair. Her thoughts turned briefly to her childhood home in Montana, to the mountains she would never see again. Channel open, Admiral. All ships standing by. Wright cleared her throat and spoke, her voice steady and clear. This is Admiral Wright to all ships. Today we face the greatest challenge humanity has ever known. 6 years earlier, Dr. Nathaniel Banks had approached Admiral Wright with an experimental technology, neural enhancement that would exponentially increase memory capacity and recall. The military applications were obvious. Commanders who could instantly recall every detail of battlefield tactics, every weakness of enemy ships. Wright had volunteered. As humanity's most decorated commander, she argued that she should bear the risk. The procedure had been painful, leaving her with migraines that lasted months, but the results were undeniable. She could recite the specifications of every ship in the fleet, every crew member's name, every battle ever fought in human history. What the Krex didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that the memory enhancement had an offensive application. Combined with the Vanguard's experimental quantum targeting system, Wright could simultaneously track and target hundreds of enemy vessels with unprecedented precision. Operation Mnemosyne had been designed as a last resort. Today, it would be their only hope. Wright remembered the day of the procedure vividly. She had lain on a cold operating table in a secure facility beneath the lunar surface. Dr. Banks stood over her, neural probe in hand. "This will hurt, Admiral," he had warned. "Your brain will fight the intrusion." Wright had merely nodded. "Proceed, Doctor." The pain had been like nothing she had ever experienced. Like lightning striking inside her skull again and again. She had screamed until her voice gave out, but refused sedation. She needed to be awake for the neural pathways to form correctly. When it was over, she could suddenly remember everything. The name of her first-grade teacher, the weather on the day she joined the academy, the exact wording of ancient books she had read decades ago, every star chart of known space. The military brass had been impressed, but cautious. "This is a tool for information recall," Admiral Foster had insisted, "not a weapon." But Wright had seen the potential immediately. If her enhanced memory could be linked to a targeting system, she could process tactical data at speeds no computer could match. Human intuition combined with perfect recall and machine precision. The tests had been promising. In simulations, she could target 50 ships at once, then 100, eventually 500. Each time, the neural stress had been greater, but so had her effectiveness. It would be like having 500 gunners, each with perfect aim, all operating simultaneously, she had explained to the Joint Chiefs. They had authorized development of the quantum targeting system to pair with her enhanced brain, but with strict limitations. Operation Mnemosyne was classified at the highest level and would only be used if humanity faced extinction. Now, on the bridge of the Vanguard, Wright watched as Dr. Singh prepared the neural interface chair. Thin filaments of quantum-sensitive material hung from the headpiece like a crown of thorns. "The interface will link your enhanced memory directly to the targeting computers," Singh explained as Wright sat down. "You'll see every enemy ship, its specifications, weaknesses, and optimal targeting solutions." "And the risks?" Captain Rivera asked. Singh hesitated. "The neural load will be immense. Essentially, the Admiral will be trying to control 500 targeting computers simultaneously with her mind. The human brain, even enhanced, isn't built for that." "Will I be conscious throughout?" Wright asked. "Yes," Singh replied. "That's part of the problem. Your consciousness needs to guide the targeting. It can't be automated." Wright nodded. "Then let's not waste time." As Singh placed the neural crown on Wright's head, Commander Garcia approached. "The Krex fleet has accelerated, Admiral. New estimate puts them at weapons range in 2 hours and 40 minutes. Wright closed her eyes as the first connections formed between her mind and the ship's systems. "That will be enough time, Commander. It has to be." "Admiral, I must formally object," said Captain Susan Rivera. "Operation Mnemosyne has never been field-tested at this scale. The neural load could kill you." Wright turned to her executive officer. "Objection noted, Captain. But those 2,000 ships carry enough firepower to glass New Terra in minutes. We have 47 ships against their armada. We could retreat, regroup with the 7th Fleet at Procyon," suggested Lieutenant Jack Donovan. Wright shook her head. "The 7th is 18 hours away at best possible speed. By then, New Terra will be ash." She gestured to the planet visible through the observation window. 5 billion souls, Lieutenant. A retreat means their death." She turned to address the bridge crew. "I know what Operation Mnemosyne asks of me. I'm prepared to pay that price." Dr. Kira Singh, the Vanguard's chief medical officer, approached with a hypospray. This will help manage the neural stress, but I can't guarantee. Just give me enough time to finish the job, Doctor. Wright interrupted, rolling up her sleeve. The injection stung briefly as the neural stabilizers entered her bloodstream. Wright knew it might extend her consciousness by an hour, perhaps two. Not enough to save her, but enough to complete the mission. Wright returned to the neural interface chair positioned at the center of the bridge. The command center had been redesigned for this very scenario. All stations arranged in a circle around her, all data flowing toward her. She would become the heart of the ship's combat systems. Commander Garcia approached her with a small flask of water. Admiral, there's still time to consider alternatives. Wright took the water gratefully, her throat suddenly dry. What alternatives, Commander? We've run every simulation. Without Operation Mnemosyne, the best-case scenario still leads to the death of over 3 billion civilians. She handed the flask back and settled into the chair. Technicians began attaching additional neural links to her temples and the base of her skull. Each connection felt like ice against her skin. Captain Rivera, status of the fleet? Wright asked, trying to ignore the growing discomfort. All ships in defensive formation, Admiral. The destroyers Valiant and Defiant have taken forward positions to provide early warning. All captains report ready for combat operations. Wright nodded, then gestured for Dr. Singh. How much time will I have between each targeting wave? Seconds, Admiral, Singh replied. Your brain will need to process each targeting solution, transmit it to the quantum weapons, then immediately move to the next target. The longer the engagement, the greater the neural strain. Understood. Wright turned to the communications officer. Open a direct channel to Fleet Admiral Foster. A moment later, Foster's face appeared on the main screen. He looked grim, the bags under his eyes betraying his lack of sleep. Admiral Wright. The situation. Unchanged, sir. We're proceeding with Operation Mnemosyne. Foster's expression tightened. Ellen, you know what this means. I do, sir. I've made my peace with it. The fleet admiral was silent for a moment. The 7th Fleet is pushing their engines beyond safe limits. We might arrive sooner than expected. Wright smiled sadly. Don't risk their drives, William. Just make sure someone remembers what happened here. Foster nodded solemnly. Godspeed, Ellen. Earth stands with you. As the transmission ended, Wright looked around at the faces of her bridge crew. Some showed fear, others pride, all showed respect. Begin final neural interface calibration, she ordered. I want weapons ready the moment the Kreks come into range. As the technicians worked, Wright closed her eyes and silently said goodbye to the life she had known. The UES Vanguard moved into position at the head of the human formation, its experimental quantum targeting system coming online. The other 46 ships formed a protective screen around their flagship. Krek's fleet approaching weapons range in 5 minutes, announced the tactical officer. Open a channel to all ships, Wright ordered. When the communications officer nodded, she continued. This is Admiral Wright. Today we face overwhelming odds, but remember what we fight for. New Terra, Earth, all of humanity. Hold the line. Protect the Vanguard at all costs during the targeting sequence. Right out. She stepped onto the targeting platform at the center of the bridge. Neural interfaces extended from the ceiling, connecting with the implants at the base of her skull. Wright inhaled sharply at the sudden flood of data. Neural interface active, reported Dr. Singh, monitoring Wright's vital signs. Quantum targeting system online. Begin targeting sequence, Wright commanded, her voice already strained. Through the neural interface, Wright could see every Krek ship, accessing their technical specifications, identifying weak points. Her enhanced memory cataloged each target. Hull configuration, shield frequency, weapon loadout. The quantum targeting system, guided by her mind, began assigning priority targets. First wave, targeted, she whispered. Fire. The Vanguard shuddered as its main quantum cannons discharged. Beams of brilliant energy lanced out into space, each finding its mark with impossible precision. 20 Krex warships erupted into flames simultaneously. Wright gasped as the neural feedback flooded her mind. She could feel each destruction as if she had reached out and crushed the ships with her hands. Names and specifications of the destroyed vessels burned themselves into her memory. Second wave, she managed, sweat beading on her forehead. Targeting. Across the bridge, officers watched in awe as the tactical display updated. The Krex fleet, initially moving in tight formation, began to scatter as they realized they were under attack from beyond their own weapons range. "Enemy fleet is responding," reported Commander Garcia. "They're launching fighters and accelerating toward us." Wright barely heard him. Her mind was fully immersed in the targeting data now. Her consciousness spread across space as she identified the next wave of targets. "Second wave, fire," she commanded. Again, the quantum cannons fired. And again, Krex ships exploded in silent bursts across the void. 40 ships destroyed now. "Admiral, your neural patterns are showing signs of stress," Dr. Singh warned, watching the medical readouts with concern. Heart rate elevated, blood pressure rising. Wright did not respond. She was already selecting the third wave of targets, her enhanced mind processing thousands of variables simultaneously. The Krex fleet's defensive patterns, their shield harmonics, their desperate communications, she could see it all. Third wave, fire. Another 60 Krex ships were destroyed, their reactors overloading as quantum beams struck with surgical precision. But now the remaining Krex vessels were close enough to fire back. "Incoming fire," shouted the tactical officer. "Multiple plasma torpedoes approaching." "Interceptors online," Captain Rivera ordered. "All ships, defensive pattern Delta." The human fleet moved in perfect coordination, smaller vessels firing interceptor beams to destroy incoming torpedoes, while cruisers absorbed damage meant for the vanguard. Through it all, Wright remained locked in her neural interface, her mind racing across space, finding targets, calculating trajectories. A drop of blood appeared at her nostril, but she paid it no heed. "Fourth wave, targeting," she said, her voice now mechanical, almost detached from her physical form. "Priority on their command ships." The tactical display showed hundreds of red dots, each a Krex warship, still advancing toward New Terra. But now there were gaps in their formation, confusion in their movements. Fourth wave, fire. The battle unfolded like nothing humanity had ever witnessed. The Vanguard's experimental quantum cannons fired in perfect sequence, each shot guided by Wright's enhanced neural processing. Beams of coherent energy sliced through Krex shields as if they weren't there, striking precisely at reactor cores, bridge sections, and weapon arrays. Ship after ship exploded in silent bursts of light against the backdrop of stars. The remaining human vessels provided covering fire, intercepting Krex fighters, and absorbing damage meant for the vanguard. Blood trickled from Wright's nose as the neural load increased. Her body trembled with each new targeting solution. "Admiral's neural activity is reaching critical levels," Dr. Singh reported urgently. "We need to disconnect her now." "Not yet," Wright gasped. 800 targets remaining. Commander Garcia watched in horror as more blood vessels burst in the Admiral's eyes. "Ma'am, we've already destroyed over half their fleet. We've bought enough time for—" "All of them," Wright interrupted, her voice barely audible. "I promised I'd remember them all." The targeting continued. 700 ships, 600. The human fleet had lost 19 vessels now, their sacrifice buying precious seconds for the Vanguard's devastating barrage to continue. 500, 400. Wright's body convulsed as neural pathways began to burn out, yet still she maintained the targeting lock. 300, 200, 100. Final targeting solution, she whispered, blood streaming from her ears now. Fire. The last Krex warship erupted in a ball of plasma and debris. "Disconnect her now," Dr. Singh shouted. Technicians rushed to remove the neural interface, but Wright's body had locked in place, her muscles rigid with neural overload. Dr. Singh injected a powerful muscle relaxant directly into the Admiral's neck. Her brain is still trying to target ships that aren't there. Singh explained frantically. We need to break the feedback loop before it causes permanent damage. As the interface disconnected, Wright collapsed into the chair. Her breathing was shallow, her pulse erratic. Blood trickled from her eyes, nose, and ears. Get her to medical, now, Singh ordered. Through the observation window, the remains of the Krex fleet drifted in space, a field of debris where 2,000 warships had once been. Captain Rivera stared in disbelief at the tactical display, which now showed only the remaining human vessels. 23 ships lost, she said quietly. Out of 47, but we destroyed their entire fleet. Commander Garcia nodded, his eyes still on the medical team as they rushed Wright's unconscious form from the bridge. At what cost, though? The cost she was willing to pay, Rivera replied, for 5 billion lives. Across the communication system, reports were coming in from the other human ships. Crews were cheering. Captains were sending congratulations. New Terra would survive. The defensive line would hold. In the medical bay, Dr. Singh worked frantically to stabilize the Admiral. Wright's neural readouts were chaotic, showing massive damage to the enhanced memory centers of her brain. Multiple hemorrhages throughout the cerebral cortex, Singh reported to her medical team. Extreme neural inflammation. Start anti-inflammatory protocol and prepare the neural regeneration unit. Wright's eyes suddenly opened, startling everyone in the room. Her gaze was unfocused, yet somehow intense. KSF Fantas, she whispered. KSF Mortari. KSS Krell Dominance. Admiral. Singh leaned closer. The ships, Wright explained, her voice weak but determined. I'm remembering their names, all 2,000 of them. Save your strength, Admiral, Singh urged. Your brain needs to rest. But Wright continued, her voice taking on an almost ritual quality. KSF Hive Collector. KSF Deathwind. KSS Emperor's Claw. As the medical team worked to heal her broken body, Ellen Wright began the task of remembering every enemy ship she had destroyed, a final act of respect for the lives she had taken to save her own people. Admiral Wright collapsed when the neural interfaces retracted. Medical personnel rushed to her side as Dr. Singh administered emergency treatment. Brain activity is chaotic but stabilizing, the doctor reported. She's alive, but the neural damage is extensive. Hours later, in the Vanguard's medical bay, Wright regained consciousness. Her vision was blurred, and the left side of her body responded sluggishly to commands. Did we win? She asked weakly. Captain Rivera nodded, tears in her eyes. Yes, Admiral. The Krex fleet is destroyed. New Terra is safe. Reinforcements arrived an hour ago. Wright closed her eyes. Our losses. 23 ships, Admiral. The crews of the other ships have been recovered. The Krex never got close enough to New Terra to cause civilian casualties. Good, Wright whispered. That's good. Dr. Singh approached with a grave expression. Admiral, I need to be honest with you. The neural damage is significant. Your memory enhancements are degrading rapidly. Within days, possibly hours, you'll begin to lose your enhanced recall capabilities. Wright nodded slowly. Then there's something I need to do while I still can. She tried to sit up, but her body refused to cooperate. The left side remained largely unresponsive. Admiral, please, Singh protested. You need to rest. Help me up, Wright insisted. Get me a recorder. I need to document this while I still remember. Reluctantly, Singh and a nurse helped Wright into a sitting position and brought her a datapad. With her functioning right hand, Wright began to input names, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. What are you doing? Rivera asked, watching the Admiral work. Recording the names, Wright replied without looking up. every Krex ship we destroyed, their classifications, their command structures, everything I saw through the neural interface. Rivera exchanged a concerned glance with Dr. Singh. Admiral, with all due respect, why? They were the enemy. They would have shown no such consideration for us. Wright paused, her fingers hovering over the datapad. Because someone should remember them. Because if we forget that our enemies are also living beings, we become something less than human. For the next several hours, Wright worked tirelessly, ignoring her body's pain and the doctor's repeated requests for her to rest. The list grew longer. Ship names, classes, notable features she had observed through the neural interface. Fleet Admiral Foster arrived on the Vanguard as Wright was completing her work. He entered the medical bay, his uniform crisp despite the long journey from Earth. "Ellen," he said warmly, approaching her bed, "you've done the impossible. Every human world is celebrating." Wright looked up, her eyes tired but clear. "William, good, you're here. I need you to ensure this record is preserved." Foster took the datapad she offered, glancing at the extensive list with confusion. "What is this?" "A memorial," Wright replied. "For them, and for us. So we remember the cost." Foster's expression softened as understanding dawned. "I'll make sure it's preserved," he promised. Dr. Singh approached with another injection. "Admiral, you must rest now. Your neural pathways need time to heal, what little healing is possible." As the medication entered her system, Wright felt the fog of exhaustion begin to overtake her. She grasped Foster's hand with surprising strength. "The Joint Chiefs will want to build more neural interfaces," she said urgently. "They'll see this as a success." Foster nodded grimly. "They already do." "Don't let them," Wright insisted. "No human should bear this burden. Find another way." As her consciousness began to fade, Wright whispered one final request. "Bring me to New Terra. I want to see what we saved." Foster squeezed her hand. "I promise." Wright slipped into healing sleep, the names of 2,000 destroyed ships still cycling through her damaged mind. 24 hours later, Admiral Wright sat in a wheelchair on the observation deck of New Terra's orbital station. Before her sat the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the President of the United Alliance, and representatives from every world in human space. Behind them, a vast audience watched in person and via broadcast to every human settlement across the stars. "Admiral Wright," began the President, "humanity owes you a debt that can never be repaid. You saved not just New Terra, but possibly our entire species. The United Alliance wishes to present you with..." "With respect, Madam President," Wright interrupted gently, "there's something I must do first." The Admiral closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she began to speak. "KSF Thantis, KSF Mortari, KSF Krell Dominance." One by one, Wright recited the name of every Krex ship she had destroyed. Without hesitation, without error, she named all 2,000 vessels from memory. The recitation took hours. Her voice grew hoarse, but she refused water, refused rest. As darkness fell over the observation deck, she continued, the stars visible through the transparent dome above. When she finished the last name, silence fell over the assembly. "Why?" the President finally asked. Wright's hands trembled slightly as she looked up. "Because someone should remember them. Because every life matters, even enemy lives. Because remembering is how we remain human." Dr. Singh stood nearby, monitoring Wright's condition. The neural damage was progressing faster than expected. Moments of confusion were becoming more frequent, and the Admiral's left side remained partially paralyzed. "Admiral," the doctor whispered, "you need rest." Wright ignored her, focusing instead on the faces around her, some confused, some moved to tears. Fleet Admiral Foster stepped forward. "The Admiral has given us more than a victory," he said, addressing the assembly. "She has given us a reminder of our humanity at the moment of our greatest triumph." The President nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. She rose from her seat and approached Wright's wheelchair. Instead of pinning a medal to the Admiral's chest as planned, she knelt before her. "Admiral Wright, you have shown us the way forward, not just through victory in battle, but through compassion in victory." Wright smiled slightly, though the effort clearly pained her. "Madam President, there is one more thing I must ask." "Anything, Admiral. Contact the Creks. Send them the names I've recited today. Let them know we remember their ships, their people. Let this be the beginning of understanding, not just another chapter of war." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The suggestion was unprecedented. The Creks had never shown interest in diplomacy, had never responded to human attempts at communication except with violence. "You believe they will listen?" the President asked. Wright nodded. "They fight to protect their worlds, just as we do. Show them we see them as worthy opponents, not just targets. Show them we remember." The President stood, her decision made. "It will be done, Admiral." As the assembly dispersed, Wright remained on the observation deck, her gaze fixed on the stars. Dr. Singh checked her vital signs with growing concern. "Your neural patterns are becoming more erratic," she said quietly. "I don't know how much longer your enhanced memory will remain intact." Wright reached up with her good hand and touched the doctor's arm. "Long enough, Kira. I've done what needed to be done." Together, they watched as New Terra rotated below them, its cities glittering in the darkness, 5 billion lives continuing because of one woman's sacrifice. "They'll remember you," Singh said softly. Wright shook her head. "That's not important. What matters is that we remembered them. All of them. That's how peace begins." As night fell completely, the stars seemed to shine brighter through the transparent dome, witnesses to an act of remembrance that would echo across human space for generations to come. Admiral Ellen Wright died 3 days later. The neural enhancements that had allowed her unprecedented victory had exacted their final toll. At her funeral, attended by billions across human space, Captain Rivera spoke of Wright's final coherent words: "Remember them all. That's our duty." 1 year later, on the anniversary of the Battle of Arcturus, the Ellen Wright Memorial was unveiled on New Terra. A vast circular chamber housed 2,000 lights, one for each Krek ship destroyed. At the center stood a simple holographic projection of the Admiral, repeating the names of the fallen, both human and Kreks. The Kreks, upon learning of Wright's remembrance of their ships, sent a delegation to the memorial. It was the first peaceful contact between the species, opening diplomatic channels that would eventually lead to the Arcturus Peace Accords. Years later, when asked why the memorial commemorated enemy vessels, President Laura Foster would quote Wright's words: "Because remembering is how we remain human." In military academies across human space, cadets would study the Battle of Arcturus, but they would also study the remembrance, as Wright's recitation came to be known. Every year, at the Academy graduation ceremony, the highest-ranking graduate would recite the names of the 23 human ships lost at Arcturus. And so Admiral Ellen Wright's legacy lived on, not just as the commander who had saved humanity through tactical brilliance, but as the leader who had reminded them what it meant to be human in the first place. The day after Wright's death, an unexpected message arrived from deep space. It came from the Krek's homeworld, transmitted on frequencies humans had never before detected. The message was simple, a list of the names of every human ship destroyed in the battle. Dr. Singh was the first to understand. "They're remembering us too," she explained to Fleet Admiral Foster. "They received our transmission of Admiral Wright's recitation, and they're responding in kind." The Krek's delegation that arrived at the memorial brought with them a gift, a crystal containing the names of every Krek's warrior who had died in the battle, etched in their own language. They placed it beside Wright's final resting place with a simple message: "We remember together." Commander Garcia, now captain of the rebuilt Vanguard, often visited the memorial when his ship orbited New Terra. He would stand before the hologram of Admiral Wright and listen as she recited the names of ships long since turned to dust. She knew what it would cost her, he once told a group of cadets touring the memorial. She knew the neural interface would kill her, but she also knew that 5 billion lives depended on her sacrifice. "But sir," one cadet asked, "why did she insist on remembering the enemy? They came to destroy us." Garcia smiled sadly. "Because Admiral Wright understood something essential about warfare. When we forget that our enemies are thinking beings with names and histories and hopes, war becomes too easy. Remembering makes us pause, makes us seek alternatives." A Krex delegation visited the memorial each year on the anniversary of the battle. Their appearance changed over time. Less armor, more ceremonial dress. Eventually, Krex and human children would visit the memorial together, part of exchange programs that grew from those first tentative diplomatic contacts. In the decades that followed, humanity would face other threats, other wars. But the lesson of Ellen Wright remained. Victory without compassion is merely conquest, and remembrance is the first step toward peace. On the centennial of the Battle of Arcturus, humans and Krex gathered together at the expanded memorial. A new hologram joined Wright's, that of Hive Commander Krell, who had led the Krex fleet. Together, their projections recited the names of the fallen from both sides, a perpetual reminder of what had been lost and what had been gained. And in the stars above New Terra, the UES Ellen Wright, the most advanced peace and research vessel ever built, prepared for its maiden voyage, with a crew of both humans and Krex venturing together into the unknown.